So again, what we've been using so far has been IntelliJ IDEA, but there's also Android Studio, okay? And in fact, just so you know, you don't have to go there right now, but this is something I'll be referencing a lot next semester, and that's developer.android.com. That is the official Android site, just so you know. So that's where everything that you want Android, if you've got to look up, is there a method to do this? You go out to developer.android.com. All right? And like I said, I just wanted to mention that to you, just so you see it. All right? You'll notice that the newest, latest, and greatest Android is Android Oreo. I'm actually taking an online class right now on Android Oreo, so I can see what's different between that and other stuff that I used to do. All right. But I went online. It says, which is better for Android development, Android Studio or IntelliJ? Okay. And everybody says Android Studio. Everybody. So my thought was, we'll keep using IntelliJ for the Java stuff, and then when we get to the Android stuff, all right, we'll switch over to Android Studio. Now, if you say, well, I don't want to do that, then just keep using IntelliJ. It doesn't really matter. All right, but I'm going to do that. Okay, I've got both of them on this machine, and that's what I'm going to do, just so you have an idea. All right. There is a 2-minute long, literally, of course I just closed it. There is a 2-minute long video. Doggone it. I suppose I'll be able to find it now. There was a 2-minute long video that I found online as far as how to open up Eclipse projects. This is it. Importing an Eclipse project. There you go. That's import was the word I was looking for. So I'm going to actually play this. I'm not going to tape it, but I'm going to play it. And then we're going to talk about the folder that I gave all of you yesterday to copy that has several Java projects on it. I have never tried to import an Eclipse project into IntelliJ IDEA. I'm going to do it before your very eyes, and hopefully it'll go seamlessly without a problem. And if it's a failure, you'll see where I failed, so hopefully you won't. All right? So let me take this. So the first thing that I'm going to do as we get through with this stuff, I thought I'd finish this. I guess I didn't. No, I'm done. All right. Is I'm going to come in and I'm going to go to that folder that I gave you yesterday, which is, okay, I was playing with Android Studio before and I did a reinstall because I had no version, so it's going to start that up. As soon as that comes up, I'm just going to close it. It's not a problem. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this folder that I gave you yesterday that has somewhere around 19 projects in it, and I'm going to make a copy of it. And I'd suggest that you do the same thing, just in case anything gets screwed up. I can always give it to you to make another copy, but that way you've got two of them on there. All right, and I'm just going to work with I'll work with the original. That's fine. All right, so I'm going to go into IntelliJ IDEA, and I'm going to attempt to go through the steps that they just showed, and hopefully that'll work without any problems. So regardless, if you want, you can start up IntelliJ IDEA, because what I'd like to do is I'd like to go in and talk about some of these projects, but this way we can talk about what's in here and you've already got the code. All right. So this is what I had yesterday. I'm going to do a file. I'm going to do close project, so I don't have anything open here. Now I'm going to try it just in the way they said it there. So I'm going to click import project. All right, it's from my C drive. It is on the desktop. And I gotta find rank, and that's because, well, what's the darn path to this? That's the path I need. All right, and actually I wanted to go one more, so that was wrong. So import project, I wanted all this, but I want the folder that is called, what the heck was it called? Give me a break. It's right there. Just double click on the folder to try to get the whole path like that. All right. So import project. There's the path. All right, I'm going to click OK. And it says, what do you want to do? I want to create the project from an existing source. That is what I want. It's already there. All right. The project name, well, I don't want it to be called this, Java Programs for the Class. All right, I'm just going to try to see if I can import the first one in, which I think was Payroll 2 or something like that. All right, so I'm going to name the project Payroll 2. All right. Well, that was a flaming success, wasn't it? All right, well, that didn't work. I'll take some time later and go over it. This is what I'm going to do, just to make it simple. All right. We went over Payroll 2A and we went over Payroll 2B. So these two files that you have, these two that are right here, those are the ones we did the other day. Payroll 2A is the one that we did where we were we were actually getting the input from the console. All right. And Payroll 2B was the one where we had the input box and we used the message dialog for the output. So you've already gone through those. All right. Number 3 we did the other day, and we also did number 4, I believe. So I'm just going to quick look. Just to show you how these are set up in Eclipse, if I double click on here, what you want to drill down into is this source folder, and that's the one. All right. Yeah, we've done this one already. We've also done, like I said, I believe, we've done a bunch of these. How's that? Not sure why it's doing it like that, but it is. All right. All right, let's look at this one. So I've got Project 5 up. It's a little bit all over the place because it's set up for the Eclipse editor. I don't feel like moving all this stuff over. This is virtually the same program that I gave you the other day, with a couple of exceptions. First exception, I'm assuming we have 5 employees that work at our place. Why do that? Why assume 5? I could have used any number, but I'm using a for loop to loop through those 5 employees. Does that make sense? All right. So really, I could have come up here and notice I've got tote emps, okay? But the point is I want to loop through 5 times, all right? The way that we ran that before, we had a heck of a lot of code in there. Whereas in here, putting in a loop, it's going to end up, you'll notice that I only have to write this stuff out once. You know, I had it once for everybody in my family or every one of you or however we did that. All right? So you end up writing a lot less code. All All right. The point is this: if you look up on the screen, you already know what this is. That is exactly the same way you'd write the same for loop in C#. So it's for, and then in the parentheses, any initialization you want to do. Typically, you're initializing your loop control variable, which is what we're doing there. Then colon, followed by your test. Then a colon. Then you either typically want to increment or decrement your loop control variable. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're telling it to start at 0, and while it's less than 5, meaning 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right? So we're doing it 5 times. So every time we'll say read in the first name, read in the last name, read it in hours worked, read it in hourly rate. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions on that? I mean, that's stuff that should be like this to you by now. It should. All right? Because other than that, there's nothing different in this particular program. So like I said, you've got a bunch of programmatic examples in here that when you're starting to work on this stuff, if you say, geez, I have any idea how to do this, you've at least got something that you can go back to and take a look at if you want to. All right. Now, we didn't get this far yesterday, but this pretty much right here, not exactly, but it pretty much is the same program that we wrote yesterday. If you look up on the screen here, this is 06 payroll. All right. So again, I want to do this, but we had our constants: max non-overtime hours, overtime rate, min hours, min rate, max rate. All right. We had our instance variables: first name, last name, hours, rate, and gross. We had our class variables: count and total gross. All right. I made 2 different formatters here. Why? One has the $ in it, so I can use that with any fields that are currency fields, and another one that's the same thing but without a $ field. And if you raise your hand and go, couldn't you have just manually added the $? We could have done that too. So there's a lot of different ways that you can always do the same thing. But the point is, when you look in here, that's pretty much the same constructor that we wrote yesterday. All right, I changed it, so here we called, right there we called set first name, set last name, set hours, and set rate. But it's the same thing. I do want to show you this. See these? See those comments? You may or may not be able to tell that those comments that are right there, those comments are in blue. That just happens to be the color that they are created in Notepad++. But when you start a comment like this, a /*, and you end it with a //, okay, you already know that that's a single line comment. When you go //, that's a single line comment. That means from wherever you put that to the end of that line's a comment. You may or may not know that this is referred to as a block level comment. All right, anything that you start with a /* and you end with a / is a block level comment. All right. There's one other kind of comment, and I'm going to show you the syntax for it in a second, but before we do, I want to show you what it looks like. If I go out to java.sun.com, it pushes me out to Oracle's official Java site, and if I go down there and I look for Java APIs, all right, it doesn't matter which one I pick, so I'll just pick the top one. And then I start looking over here, and I grab something from here, all right? So I'm going to grab this java.sql, all right? Wow, they really changed this around a lot since the last time I've been out here. But that's fine, we'll work our way through it. Class, they have totally changed the way this looks. Yep. Well, I'm going to show you anyway. That if you start a comment with a / and put 2 stars next to it, and then end it with a //, that's called a Java doc comment. That used to be just Java had that, but now a lot of other languages have that as well. What that will do is it'll end up writing a lot of internal documentation for you. It creates HTML files for you. All right? It does a lot of different work for you. All right? So I've got a couple of those that are in here, but that's, again, it's not that big a thing. You saw this, like I said. Here's our one constructor where we were passing everything in. Here's our other constructor, which was a no arg. So you saw all of this yesterday. All right? Then we went in and we did our get first name, our set first name, our get last name, our set last name, our get hours, our set hours, our get rate, our set rate, our get gross. All right? Well, a couple more things. Notice that I have another function that I wrote in here. This is an overloaded function. In other words, if I call a Java program and I pass it the toString method, it does something by default. Does that make sense? Typically, if you call toString with something, it takes whatever it is, like if it's a number, it converts it to the string equivalent of that number. But I can override that toString method to make it do whatever it is I want it to do. And what do I want it to do? Well, you've already seen this. All right, this is the same thing that we looked at yesterday. So I'm saying that whenever I tell it to print out, print that. But if you notice, I'm only printing I only have that in there once. I don't have that in there for every employee. All right? And then I've got my totals. You notice something that's missing in here? Anybody notice anything? How about this? I'm looking for main. There isn't one. All right? Main is not in here. Main is in a separate file, and that separate file has got the same name as this name, except I appended onto the end of it driver. All right? We talked about, for a long time, we've talked about what a driver is. A driver, ideally, what it does is it just calls other routines to do whatever it has to do to get done. Well, notice what we're doing here. Again, this isn't exactly the same as yesterday because I used my family here as opposed to what we did in class. All right? But if you notice, the ideas are the same. Okay? There's me, 40 hours a week, $20 an hour. That should say I make $800, right? If I run that. Here's one, 50 hours a week, $20 an hour. So has overtime coming. So she shouldn't make $1,000, all right, because for 10 of those hours, she should make time and a half. So she should make $1,100. 100 of that would be overtime. This should be illegal. You can't work a negative number of hours, all right? This should be illegal because the rate is too high. So I tried to write those where I would make purposely put some errors in there, okay? And then call this one, I used my youngest daughter here for that, but with nothing, because remember that one right there, this line 21 right here, should go and call that constructor. Now that should start to make sense to you, all right? Now with the other one, I'm just going to move this over so you can see all of that in here. When we look at the other one, again, so when I come in there with Taylor and I put -10, all right, which is the hours, and 20, which is the rate, it comes in there and it says hours. Is that greater than or equal to 0? No. So rather than setting the hours, it should set hers to 0. Does that make sense? There is validation being done in this particular method. All right? And the same kind of thing, all right, with the next one, Mackenzie, I gave her, in that case, it was a rate that was 1,001, which was greater. It was greater than the minimum, but it was not less than the maximum, so that should have been set to 0. Again, I mentioned yesterday, rather than setting those to 0, maybe I want to use a default. You know, maybe I want to say, hey, if you don't know, you work 40 hours, you make $10 an hour, or whatever. We didn't do that. But when you look at this driver, look at how much nicer this is. Now, when I do this, I say system.out.println Jeff. Everybody see what's there in the gray? That's going to call that toString method. The one I wrote only once. So rather than me having to write all those extra lines of code that you saw yesterday, where for each person we had to write down their first name, their last name, their hours, their rate, and their gross. I had to put those extra 5 lines in every time. And I preface that by putting in this, just the payroll object Jeff. Now, instead of writing 6 lines, it's 2 lines and 2 lines and 2 lines, etc. Does that make sense? That's one thing as a programmer you should always be looking to do. Anytime that you're repeating the same code verbatim in more than one place, it should start sending a signal to you. Hey, is there any way I could make that a separate method or something? So I call it twice, but only write it once. All right? Okay, then I came back in here, just like we saw yesterday. I did a set hours for Taylor. I did a set rate for Mackenzie, etc. And I gave Chloe information. Then I printed out all the information again. What I'm asking you is, if you remember from yesterday, is what I just showed you here, does that make sense? Is there anything in there that does not make sense? All right, now, in the worst case, if for some reason we can't get this to work with creating a brand new IntelliJ IDEA thing, you could always go in and create a brand new project and then manually just copy this and paste it in there. Now, that's a pain in the butt to do, all right? And I'll try to work with it, and I'll look at it, because I'm sure it's not that hard, all right? When they, usually when they do that kind of stuff, they say, hey, any fool can do this. I qualify, all right? So there shouldn't be a problem doing that. That's what I'm telling you. All right. The next example that's here look familiar? How many times you have to see this frickin' array fun program before you start thinking it's not really very fun, all right? But if you take a look in here, here's the driver. That's it. There is no more. I can't move this up and down on the screen. That's the whole driver. So I'm telling it here to basically create a new array fun object, which is going to create the array, sort the array in ascending order, sort the array in descending order, give me the minimum, give me the maximum, give me the sum, give me the average, etc. And then print out the array. Does that make sense? The key line is the line right here. That one. Because that one is going and calling this. And look what's here. Again, the stuff that's here shouldn't surprise you. Okay? This is how you create an array in this language. Int bracket bracket, the name of the array equals new int, then in brackets, the number of elements you have. All right? If I wanted to create a new array, I don't want to do this, but if I wanted to do this, for example, string, bracket bracket, family members. I could say equal, then I use curly braces and I can put in here Jeff, Sandy, Taylor. You get the idea? So if you want to pre-fill an array in Java, you put it in curly braces. And guess what? That's the same way we did it in C#. All right? So you've seen this kind of thing before. All right. Now, what this does is this creates 3 different arrays. Okay? And that's what I've done there. I'm gonna use 3 different arrays here. One array will have my original numbers in it. One array will hold my numbers in ascending order, and one array will hold my numbers in descending order. Does that make sense? All right. You could argue and say, well, shouldn't you have done this? Shouldn't you have said something like, I don't know, like static, final, int, tote, equal 25, and then made all of these tote? That probably would have been a better way to do it. All right? Because then I'd only have to change that in one place if I wanted to. I'm not going to do that. We could have done that. I'm just not going to. All right? And again, notice in here, none of these things have been initialized. Does everybody see what I'm talking about? Nothing in there is initialized. Why? Because you initialize things in the constructor. Don't initialize things outside of the constructor. Well, will it break if I do? It shouldn't, but it's just not considered the right practice, the right way of doing things. All right? All right, so here's my constructor. I only have one constructor in here, and it's expecting nothing. All right. Now, when you look in here, this looks a little weird, or at least it possibly looks a little weird. That's creating a new instance of the Java random number class. All right, that's not doing anything. It's not making a random number. It's creating an instance of the Java random number class that I'm calling rand. All right, I'm going to actually use that in here. That's going to generate the random number between 1 and 100. Does that make sense? You might raise your hand and go, okay, I sort of get it, but why do you have to even do this then? Because rand doesn't exist before you do that line. And it doesn't have to be called rand. Amin could put in there random Amin equals new random, and it would work just fine. Then he would have to change this line here to Amin, and that would work okay. Normally you call it rand or random or whatever, something like that. You don't have to do that, but by now one of the things I've been throwing at you all the time is just because it's good programming practice, you should come up with variable names that are reflective of whatever it is you're trying to do. All right? Okay. So we're telling it to go through this 25 times. Notice in here, see that in gray? I could have put 25 there. I could have, if I created a constant here, I could have put the constant there. Or I can put the name of the array dot length, which is the same way we did it in C#. This will become like a broken record after a while when I say, and that's the same way we did it in C#. All right? And the question got asked, and I don't know if I really answered it yesterday. It was one of you two, I think, that asked. And you said, okay, if Java's the most popular language, why are we spending so little time on it? Okay? And the answer that I gave was that it's so close to C# and we've already taken C#. Well, 3 years ago, when Charles Corrigan, who is the department chair, went to this meeting over 3 days in the summer with all people from St. Charles County business and industry, and there were some St. Louis people there too, they said the number one language around here we want people to learn is C#. That's why there's more of an emphasis on C# than there is Java here, just so you know. All right? I mean, to me, they're so similar, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't have mattered to me if last semester you would have taken beginning Java. You could have taken beginning Java last semester and still transitioned into ASP.NET, and it really wouldn't have been that big of a transition. All right? Okay, so we are creating 25 random numbers there. Does that make sense? That line of code right there is creating a random number each time through, and it's assigning it to the associated array location. So if you imagine that I drew this, and these were supposed to be like, let's just say there were 25 of these. First time through it gave me 37, then 8, then 91, then 73, then 10, then 41, then 18, etc. That's what we're doing. So we've got an array that's called numbers original. That would be a numbers original 0, numbers original 1, etc. We'd have 25 of those. Then, after we do that, I took those 25 values one at a time and copied them to the other two arrays. Eventually, we're going to sort those arrays. But now I've got 3 arrays, one called numbers original, one called numbers ascending, one called numbers descending. They all hold the same 25 numbers. Does that make sense? They're the same 25 numbers, and they're all in the same order as of right now. Okay? All right. I'm saying the minimum. Remember, my numbers are between 1 and 100. So I'm saying my minimum is 101, and my max is -1. you've heard me say this before, those two lines in gray will assure you that when we run the program the first time, whatever number that gets generated will become our new min, and it will become our new max. We are guaranteed that. All right? The sum is going to be the sum of all 25 numbers. So it'll be like 37 plus 8 plus 91 plus 73, etc. And the average will take that sum and divide it by 25. I'm asking you this question now. Is there anything in here, right there, that doesn't make sense? Notice we've already declared those numbers, those values up here. They're all ints except for the average, so we can do the average to 2 decimal places. All right? Okay. Then we get the min. Okay? And return this dot min. Well, what is min? Well, we've talked about this before. We can come in here and assume min is the smallest number, or I'm sorry, the first location, then we loop through the other ones. There's so many different ways that you can write this thing. It really, after a while, it's like you just keep saying the same stuff. I don't want to say it anymore. So that'll give you the smallest. This will give you the largest. All right, and the set min and set max are identical, except one says min and one says max, one says less than right there, and one says greater than. Other than that, they're the exact same thing. Okay? All right. The sum is just going to loop through and add them. The average is going to take the sum and divide it by 25. All right? Now, the bad thing, and I don't know bad is the right word, but it's the one I'm going to use here, is having to write ascending and descending methods to do the sorting. Java doesn't have a built-in sort method. So here we're just using basically, it's a simple bubble sort, pretty much. So it's comparing these two numbers. And it says, oh, well, that one's bigger. So it compares the 8 and the 37. Then it compares these two. Okay, nope, 91's still the biggest. So it compares 91 and 73. Nope, 91's the biggest. Then it compares, nope, 91's the biggest. Nope, 91's the biggest. Nope, 91's the biggest. So when it gets done, it's done a bunch of swapping, but the idea is the one on the end is the biggest number. Does that make sense? Then the next time I come through here, I don't have to check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 values. I only have to check 6 because that one's already out of the mix. So when I do it the second time, now we've got 73 and 91. Then I only have to check the next 5, etc. And literally, I went and grabbed this off the internet and changed it so it used my variable names. All right? And then the one for the descending is the exact same thing, except instead of saying less than, for the descending we said greater than, for the ascending, etc. All right? And that's it. But what I want you to understand from this particular program is if you look at the driver, I can run this program, run it, boom, run it again, boom, run it again, boom. I can keep doing that. It's not going to be in a loop, so I'll have to rerun it every time. Every time it's going to give me 25 different numbers, okay? But every time after it does that, it's going to give me those 25 numbers in ascending order, then in descending order, then the smallest, then the largest, then the sum, then the average. And then it'll print out the original array. Does that make sense? So what we're doing will result in different output every time because we're generating as input 25 different numbers every time. But the way that we're doing this, okay, is the exact same thing. So imagine, if you're still confused, imagine this. Imagine that you worked at a company and you were on an assembly line, all right, and you did the exact same type of work 40 hours a week every day. And when you finished your 8-hour shift, the next person came in and did their work the exact same way. It's kind of what we're doing here. But instead of the people doing the work, it's the 25 and the numbers. That's all. All right? So you could take a look at that one if you're so inclined. Trying to remember what was in all these. You can see it was 10/14/2016, so it was over a year ago. And if you notice, let's see, and I didn't realize this, evidently they do have a trim function. See that? fn.trim. All right. This is pretty much the same one that we wrote before, but it does have some trims in here, and this one has arrays in it. This is the payroll one, so number 8, or 7 I should say, is the payroll one, 7B, with arrays. All right? All right, I was going to tell you this later. I'll tell you it right now. I hate saying stuff like this, first of all, because it's very sad, and second of all, I don't want any of you to go, oh, I'm sorry. Just don't, okay? My father is dying, all right? And I am going to be leaving at 1 o'clock on Friday after Miss Zika leaves, all right? Because I wanted to see him, hopefully, before he goes, all right? He's 89. He's lived a good life, all right? But he's been bad for a while. And I asked Charles this morning, my mom called me yesterday and said, hey, if you want to see your dad, you should try to come down here this weekend, all right? So, yeah, I'd like to. And when I mentioned it to Charles, I thought, well, I could just tell you guys you can leave at 1 when she leaves. And I thought Ethan would be like, yeah. And Charles didn't like that. Charles said, that's okay. I can sit with them till 4:25. So he's going to do that. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some kind of a Java program. You're not going to have to turn it in. But I'm going to give you some kind of a Java program for you to work on yourselves on Friday. And then we will go over it on Monday. I don't care if you want to work, and ask somebody else around you for help or whatever. But I'm going to tell Charles, yeah, they've got an exercise they're going to be working on. Now, he's not exactly like me in a lot of ways, but one thing is, he has no problem getting up 5 or 10 times an hour, walking around and seeing what's on all your screens. The only reason I'm telling you that is if you ever put anything, because I don't do that very often. All right, some of you I know watch YouTubes or do whatever. If you're getting your work done, it doesn't matter to me. It may matter to him. All right, so you probably don't want to do that. All right. Next week, just so you remember, next week is the time we're working on the portfolios, correct? All right. If my dad does happen to pass this weekend, I'm going to be out for probably 1, 2, or 3 days next week. All right. I mean, it's not even impossible, because I'm planning on coming back Sunday. It's not even impossible that I'll have to turn around and go back Monday or Tuesday or whatever. And if I do, I do. All right. All right, so we've looked at some of these. I looked at the array fun. How about this one? Anybody know what a palindrome is? Well, if you say kind of, you probably don't, all right? Because it's very simple. Bob's a palindrome. Why? Because Bob's the same thing forward and backward. A Toyota is a palindrome because it's the same thing forward and backward. All right, this program will allow you to enter a string and tell you whether or not it's a palindrome. So it tells you whether or not it's the same thing forwards as backwards. So if I put Jeff in there, Jeff and Fedge aren't the same thing. So it would say it's not a palindrome, okay? And if I put Bob in there, it would say Bob is a palindrome. That kind of an idea. So why even talk about this? Why does that matter, etc.? Does that matter, etc.? Well, what I want you to get out of this is I want to explain a couple things to you about Java that you may know or that you may not know. And they're pretty much the same as the way they are in C#, just so you know. But if I do this, you should know the answer to this already because we sort of talked about it yesterday. But if I do this, if I say string name1 equal double quote Jeff double quote, and then I say string name2 equals double quote Jeff double quote, and I say if name1 equal name2. My question for you is, Is that true or false? And why? How many people think it's true? Raise your hand. Means out there on an island by himself. How many think it's false? Raise your hand. Okay, you gotta vote.
It's true.
It's false.
Don't use
Because what happens when you do this is somewhere out in the memory of the computer. This is no, if you say that's not what memory looks like, fine, then you draw it. All right. So imagine this is the memory of the computer, and there's a billion or whatever of these little locations. All right. Then starting in location 1000, it's got JEFF. Now it wouldn't say JEFF; it would have the zeros and ones that make up JEFF. All right. Then let's assume way over here on location, let's say 9800, we've got JEFF. You all understand what I'm saying? Okay. This Jeff right here is not the same as this Jeff right here. We're not talking about what's inside, we're talking about the locations. This says, do these both point to the same location in memory? They do not. So if I want to say, do they both, are the contents the same? That's when I'd have to say, if name1 dot equals name2. That first if statement is false. The second if statement is true. All right? Java handles strings a little bit differently than most other languages do. All right? So, what if I want to do this? What if I type, what if I come over here and do this? So I said here, and again, I'm just trying to show you a few things, but I want them to make sense to you. So I come over here and I did this. String 1. I'm not going to compare them, but I've got two different things. Again, so in memory, in fact, let's just have one. We don't even need two of them. We're going to have just this one. So, as we said, somewhere in the memory of the computer, I don't care where, but somewhere, let's say at a location 11111. All right, it's got Jeff. Now, later on in the program, I say, you know what? I want my full name in there. So I say name1 equals Jeffrey. This is kind of important, so if you'd at least look at this, okay? What happens when you do this is at some other place in memory, some other place. So let's say that that's at location 4400. It comes in there and it writes JEFFREY. Then it tells the system, okay, this memory, it says it's garbage. And Java has a thing that runs that's called the garbage collector. And it'll go and look and it'll say if it's garbage, it'll reclaim that memory. So it'll remove that stuff that was in there. But what I'm trying to tell you is strings are what are known as being immutable. So once you go and create one and you change its value, it changes it, but it changes it and puts the value somewhere else in memory. Okay? And again, is that big a thing? No, but it's important that you at least understand that. All right? Now,
would Jeff be on the other side of it, though?
What's that?
Wouldn't Jeff be like further?
It doesn't matter. Where it gets put in memory is really, it's random. All right? It's wherever the processor happens to be pointing to at that time. All right? Now, so strings are what are called immutable. On the other hand, if you look on this up here, there's a thing called a string builder. A string builder is not immutable, it's mutable. All right? So I could create three different strings. I could create one called first name, one called middle name, one called last name, and then I could put them all together or put them together separately into a string builder. String builders don't change. You can change what's inside of them, but it's kind of like they have a constant. Once you declare them, that's where their address is. Does that make sense? All right. So they're more versatile than strings are. So this program, again, is going to tell us, please enter a string, and it can be as long as you want it to be, and I will tell you whether the string is the first. It's the same thing forwards and backwards. So notice what we're doing here. First of all, we're looking right here and we're saying if it's a letter. Everybody see this? See up there where it says dot is letter? I'm only comparing letters. So if there's special characters, we're throwing them out. If there's spaces, we're throwing them out. If they're numbers, we're throwing them out. Doesn't matter. So if I type in there A, B, C, D, E, F, question mark, comma, colon, 73, it's going to throw out everything except the letters. And it takes the letters and it basically starts to build a new string with them. Does that look familiar? Charat. We used charat before when we were working in JavaScript. It works the same way here. All right. Does this look familiar? Converting something to uppercase, the same way JavaScript does it. Why? Because JavaScript ripped off almost everything from Java that it could. Hell, it even ripped off their name. All right. And it tells you then that either the strings are the same or the strings are not the same. Now, just so you know, we could have done it in another way too. If we wanted to know if it was exactly the same forwards and backwards, and we didn't care. So let's assume that I put a string in here right now. If I put a string in here like this, ABC123, comma, or a semicolon, comma, 456 R. What this program does is it changes it and it throws out this, and it throws out this, and it throws out this. So what's left is ABCR. All right, that's what the program does. Then it says, okay, grab that string and give it to me backwards. So RCBA. And then start to compare these, one character at a time. All right, if I set it up so, you know what? I don't care. If it's got letters, if it's got numbers, it doesn't matter. So if I put in here, hello with a 0, 127, exclamation point, 33, and then another H as an example. If I want to keep all those, think about how easy it is to compare these. All I have to do is write a for loop that goes from here to here, right? Then write another for loop that goes from here to here. And then all I have to do is compare each letter every time. So H, they're the same. E3, they're not the same. Can't be a palindrome. That's the easiest way to do something like that. All right? But the way that it was set up on this exercise for the students, it was throw out everything that were not letters. All right? They didn't like it because it was harder. Okay, this is much more complex. I'm just going to put this up here. I'm not going to go over it because it's time for a break, but when you look here, notice we've got a bunch of different classes now. We've got a payroll class that's got what every employee has, but we have hourly employees, we have commission employees, we have salaried employees, etc. Remember doing this in C#? Because we did. All right, this is pretty much that same program in Java. All right, rather than going over it right now, let's take a break. It's 1:35. Let's come back at 1:50, please.